done trying to engage with young people around food and local food systems, but it's also the start of a process that will ultimately help us to do more to represent and include young people in our work and to do it better. And we'll tell you more about the details of what we've got planned later on. I suppose the first question that will be in people's heads is, what do we mean when we're talking about young people? So just to kind of share a little bit about what we're thinking in SFP and in the Fair Food work that we do, and in the context of today's discussion. So when we're talking about young people, we're usually not talking about children. We're kind of thinking above school age, but below adulthood. Generally, we're thinking kind of 18 to 25 years old, but we're not rigid with this. 16 to 30 is also another potential window of work with young people. And part of the reason for this is obviously we know there's already lots of organisations doing good work with school-age children, and the approaches of that are quite different. So that's why we're kind of looking at this upper age bracket of young people. And obviously, for the context of all of our discussions today, we obviously recognise young people are not all the same, and our conversations need to take in the varying situations and the interests and needs of all of the intersections across young people. We're not just talking about one group here. But also we recognise that each of you in your own food partnership work will have your own understanding of who you consider to be young people. So when we're sharing our experiences, please do feel free to share whatever feels relevant and the work that you've been doing, even if it doesn't quite fit within those definitions. So just in terms of what we're going to be doing today, so we're going to have a few speakers for you, a couple of people, Helen and Sophie, sharing some context, deeper context around this work, and Alex and Anya from Cambridge and Calderdale doing a couple of inspiration presentations on the excellent work that they've been doing with young people. But then we also want to spend, a really good bulk of this time sharing our own experiences. We'll go into some breakout rooms and get the opportunity to talk to each other, and then we'll talk about this community of practice moving forward. So hopefully that makes sense, and that's what you're here for today. So before we kind of move into the presentations, I just wanted to go to the chat, which I can't see, which I'm going to stop sharing. So hopefully I can. And maybe a couple of people just want to share their answer to that initial question. So representation and inclusion of young people in local food partnerships. Why is this important to you? And just introduce yourself and why you're here. Anyone wants to go and just unmute. Lovely to hear from you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Lee Simpson, and I'm working in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. It's quite close to Aberdeen, and it's a very rural area. And I think it is important because the poverty in the rural areas as well is something that we face, and we need to include young people because they are the experts. That is their experience, and we need to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you. And I realise I should say we're recording this session so that others who can't make it today can go look back. So please, hopefully that's okay, but let us know if not. Anyone else want to just do a quick intro, share why this is important to you, why you're here today?
Hi, I'm Mary. I work at Boyd Powys Food, so we're Powys, so Mid Wales, a very, very large county, again, incredibly rural, and I'm situated just outside the biggest town in the county, and we are 13,200 at the last census. We have in Powys a lot of brain drain. A lot of people leave Powys to find other areas. And a lot of our focus at the moment in the partnership is about bringing in more horticulture and securing supply chains and growing a horticultural sector. And then part of that is really this connection with why it's important to look after the farmlands and our soils, and sort of prove to young people that might be interested in the area what's exciting about food and farming and growing. So capturing this area is really important, and finding new ways to talk to people that excites them is why I'm here today. Is it always easier to get into schools than it is to get into sort of the 24-year-olds? Because a lot of them have already left or been drawn away.
Thank you so much, Mary. Maybe one more person just to share a little bit. We'll obviously have more time to introduce in discussions later as well, but one more person would be great.
Hello, I'll say hi. I'm sorry, I've just turned my camera on there. I'm Edie. I'm from St Chad's Community Project in Gateshead. I'm community retail manager, and I've brought along Fozia, who's an actual young person. And she's one of our volunteers, and I wanted her to kind of come and see this session. And I think, yeah, I just want to echo like what Mary said. I think it's really important to be thinking about horticulture, but also I'm interested in, I think sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch, right? So we've got lots of a mismatch in how we're thinking about what we're able to do for young people, but what the realities actually are like out there. So we're definitely wanting to, provide all of those skills, and there's lots and lots of talk about volunteering programs and what we can do, but the reality is that the job market is very, very difficult beyond what we're able to do in our settings. So I think, like Mary was saying, some of that like co-production and really helping to kind of drive forward horticulture and drive forward like food work ourselves, so that we can make sure that those jobs are there when these guys are ready to have them, because they're the future. So
Perfect phrase to end on there. Thank you so much. So I'll hand over to Helen from Food Matters now, just to give us a little bit more context about the work that they're doing across SFP with young people.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, where do I start? So I guess oh, I'm having some sort of okay, great, thanks. So I guess early last year or before that, we were contacted by Barnardo's and Co-op, who've done some really fantastic research, which I think you've probably all heard about by now. And they did a survey of Co-op members, and they found that 96% of young people aged 16 to 25 wanted more food partnerships, and they want to be involved in shaping them. And then they did a freedom of information request across all of the councils. And obviously just over half of local councils actually have a food partnership, and only 28% of the food partnerships currently deliver benefits for young people. And only 13% actually involve young people in designing or delivering food initiatives. So there's quite a lot of work still to be done. And then later on in the year, I think Ruth Hislop-Gill, who should be in the audience from Bristol Good Food Partnership, posted a question on the Rise Up list about how do we explore embedding youth voice within the food partnership and across the strategy and the action planning processes. And this has sparked up lots of interesting conversations with different food partnerships. At the same time, we've been developing the framework for action on inclusion and representation, which we know out of the 4 groups that have been identified through the co-development work, that young people is one of our target groups. We did a listening session with young people last year as part of the Fair Food co-development process. And they said pretty much what we were kind of expecting to hear, in a way that that young people do want to be involved in their local food partnership, but they don't have the opportunity. Either they don't have a food partnership in their area, or they don't know about any opportunities for them to get involved in their local food partnership. So that's kind of where this session has come from. We are sort of thinking about it from the Sustainable Food Places ethos. We want to build on experience that's already there in our network, because obviously lots of people are doing really interesting things across the UK. So we wanted to use this session as a way to kind of harness some really great ideas that are out there, share approaches, successes, but also to think about the kind of all the challenges that we're all experiencing and the lessons that can be learned across the network if everyone can kind of share their ideas. And then hopefully we can then use this as a way to work out how we can support you to better engage young people, or sort of more meaningfully involve young people. Thanks. I'll pass back to Alex now.
Thanks, Helen. Well, I'm going to pass straight back over to Sophie from Belfast, who's going to talk a little bit more about their work.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you so much for having me. I think this is a really cool conversation and not one that is had very often, so I'm really excited to be here. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on youth engagement. I don't even have slides to share with you, but I'll share a story. So when I was growing up, I was in a household that was quite food insecure, but when you're a young person, I think growing up, you don't realize what food insecurity actually is. It was just the norm for me, day to day, in and out. And it was only until recently that I realized that that really wasn't the norm and should never be the norm for anybody growing up. But what I want to share is that I found a great interest in food through science and through agriculture. And I used to enter science competitions growing up, really as a few days off school. And I found that I could be with my friends in our capital city, Dublin. I'm from the south of Ireland. But our science competitions or science projects ended up doing really, really well and catapulted myself and two others into this tokenistic world where we were labeled as young women in STEM, which we didn't feel like that was us. We just loved food and we loved agriculture and we loved food systems transformation, even though that wasn't a phrase at the time. It was, people were talking about food security. We were the tokenistic panel of young people. We were patted on the head and told, great project, well done, off you hop. We found ourselves in the midst of very pale, stale, male rooms, I would say. I've seen a lot of bald heads in my time as a youth activist. And we were often the ones that weren't paid for our time. We weren't given per diems for our time. And there were so many rooms that I went into, including the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, where I was sitting with 10 other incredible young people from across the world. We were told we were given 5 minutes to speak each. In New York, my first time in the United States, I was thinking, this is incredible. I'm in the UN buildings. To be told after all the big presidents spoke, sorry, we don't have time for the youth voices anymore. And we traveled all this way to hear that. That's when I realized that the entry for young people is at the hyper local level. At the global level, we often get crowded out. And it was at the back of one of these big UN rooms where myself and 10 other young people weren't given seats at these tables. We weren't invited onto the tables to speak. Where we looked at each other and we realized that the future of food is being created without the future of food, and this needs to change. So myself and 10 others, myself and 9 others, I was the 10th, we decided to found Act for Food in 2021. And Act for Food was a youth-led movement to transform food systems. We started off with a consultation process. We partnered with people like War Child, who work with nomadic young people, with the FAO. We partnered with hyper local organizations and communities and churches and sports group to carry out a consultation in which we reached 100,000 young people in 2 months. And we asked them, if you had a decision maker sitting in front of you, what do you want them to do to transform food systems? But equally importantly, what can you commit to doing yourself? Within our first year, we grew to exist in 30 countries with 100 young people under the age of 25 in each of those countries. Now, I'm not going to say we did everything right. We had no funding at this point in time. I mean, I know our sector is severely lacking funding as it is. But within that year, we realized how important it was to give young people a seat at the table, but also give them leadership positions to be able to carry out projects in their own communities where they knew the gaps lay. We found funding and we experimented with different structures of youth engagement, specifically centering decolonization of structuring of food systems work. And what we realized was that there is no one size fits all, and there never will be. With each generation of young people, we restructure to suit their needs and passions and interests, with our core pillars staying the same, which was the results of that consultation. We also found that our USP was ensuring that young people had a little pot of funding that they could experiment with themselves, and they could monitor and evaluate their own work and then showcase that work to their peers. We also worked intergenerationally. We didn't believe that young people, we knew it all. And we also don't believe that the results of a better food system lie on our shoulders. There are a lot of people to be held accountable. We also found that abstract phrases and terms like food justice didn't really stick with our young people. Now, we were working with young people in over 30 countries, so maybe that's different when you work with young people in a specific community. But you had to link a term like food justice to something tangible. What does food justice really look like in a specific community for that young person? What does food sovereignty look like? What does waste management look like? What does better procurement look like? And ensuring that there's credibility to that work. We backed up all our young people's work with science and evidence as well, so that we weren't sending them out into the world, because oftentimes we found that a nice, good story doesn't stick, and also then inhibits a tokenism when young person or youth engagement is just seen as a good story. I've been told I've only got a minute, probably less than a minute now, and I'm really good at blabbing. So what I'm really coming around to is that we had young people in all their forms. We had young mothers and young fathers. We had food producers and agriculturalists. We had entrepreneurs, but poets and singers and musicians. And we had people who wanted to do a food festival in Nicaragua that showcases young people's produce. We also had a young man in Zimbabwe pull out a sofa onto his university campus and simply ask people as they were walking by, "What are you having for lunch? And how can I convince you to eat something local? Why don't we have lunch tomorrow together, right in this spot?" And the next day, 50 students came with meals that were locally sourced, and they ate lunch together. And I think this just shows the beauty of working with young people and giving them structural seats at the table in which they are able to show joy through their work. They know where the gaps lie, but they also need to work intergenerationally with people. And I don't think we have all the answers. And we're still figuring it out. But that's my story of working as a young person with young people. And I've just handed Act for Food over to the next generation, and we're currently hosted in Nairobi, because that's another thing. The food system is always reaching blockages because of unequal power dynamics. And we need to be able to hand work over to the next generation when we know that we can't take it further anymore. So I hope that helps. I probably spoke too much, but thank you, Alex and Helen, for having me here. I'm really excited for the breakout rooms.
Not at all. That was incredibly inspiring, and just to hear the ways that you've done, things that aren't tokenistic or extractive, and really embedding young people and views at the heart of work is what we're all here to talk about. So I might just open up for anyone that has a question for Sophie. Perhaps if you press the raise your hand button, so that we can see whether we might have loads, we might not have any, but if you press the button if you've got a question for Sophie. Edie, I think, come up first for me.
Hello, yes. My question was, I wrote down when you were talking about backing up your work with science and evidence, I'm really interested to know what that looks like what kind of things were you evidencing and how?
Yeah, 100%. Great question, because this is one that we spent a lot of time workshopping. We ended up creating, through about a 2-year-long process, a 6-month-long youth leadership training program in food systems transformation, which then culminated in a in-person workshop, which was a week long, where our young people led the workshops. But our 6-month-long training program looked a bit like starting at the basics. What is a food system? What does that look like for you as a young person? What is a local food system, and how does that link to a global food system? What are the science and facts behind food systems transformation? We looked at the Eat Lancet, we looked at the SOFI reports, and then we also looked at hyper-local census data for the countries that our young people were coming from. And this, I'm not going to pretend like this was easy work at all. It took a lot of time to create this kind of structure. And then we also looked at, how do you create a campaign? Like, what are you interested in? Where are the gaps in your local community? How can we think creatively together to fill those gaps? What are you passionate about, and what can you take on in the next 6 months, little by little? And then, how do you create a campaign that speaks to different audiences? Who are you talking to? Is it your parents? Is it your caretaker? Is it your school? Who are you connecting with? And what does that conversation look like? But also, when you're speaking to your peers, how do you bring people on board? How do you keep people on board? And then we would do this through fun exercises, like everyone would get a role. Like, I would be someone who just really dislikes youth engagement, and I'm really just negative about it. And then someone beside me would be so for young people, and then we'd have a young person, and then maybe a local teacher, etc. And we would role play this on how to speak together, and get people on the same page, or at least meet people where they are and come to a common ground. Then also, how do you monitor and evaluate your campaign when you implement it? What does that look like? How do you budget plan and monitor your budget, even if it's a budget of 200 USD? What does that look like? And how do you write a report? I think these are all brilliant skills to take forward, even if at the end of the 2 years of being in Act for Food, you're not interested in food systems at all. I think they're really great skills that we could give our young people to do. So when we talk about science and evidence, it was a lot of trial and error, and then our young people finding that evidence to back up what they're saying through this youth leadership program. That it
Thanks,
also
Sophie, I'm going to very
Oh, sorry,
reluctantly
Alex.
jump in just
I
because
talk
I
a
know
lot.
we've got other questions, and but someone's written in the chat actually that something I was going to say. Have you got any links to formats or just kind of document? Maybe after, I'll do one more question from Eva, and then if you've got any links you can share in the chat, some more details, that would be great. But yes, Eva, you've got a question as well.
Yeah, if we're short on time, maybe the chat, sharing information in the chat would be better. But I think Sophie might have already touched on what I was going to ask, which was, what do you think universities could be doing better to engage young people in food systems and food campaigns, not just in STEM, but in social sciences, how do we make food issues more engaging and interesting for non-STEM students and STEM alike?
Great question. I don't know if I have the answer. I don't think universities are doing enough. My undergraduate course was in international development and food policy, and it got cut last year because it didn't bring enough money into the university, even though we had a big petition from students past and present to keep it. And now they've put as a version of that course in the business department. I also don't, I struggle to see food systems integrated into university education systems when young people are setting up student-led food banks for students on campuses. When there are such high rates of student food insecurity and poverty, but then we have green flag systems and gold stars for universities who are doing environmentally good things. I think it's hypocrisy, and I think it's injustice. And I think some universities are doing it well. I just did a master's in food policy at City St. George's, in which Alex is unmuted again.
I'm so sorry. It's always the thing, isn't it? Though,
Sorry, I'll
so we
type
could
it
talk
in the
for so
chat.
much longer. Yes, but please do put things into the chat. And yeah, I know we'd all love to hear much more, but we've got such limited time. So thank you so much, Sophie. And yeah, we'll be sharing. Will we be sharing contacts afterwards? I'm not sure, but there's the Rise Up list where we can share. Helen, are you going to jump in and?
I wasn't thinking particularly about sharing contacts, but we can if people are up for it.
We can chat after this meeting and see what people are wanting. So thanks so much. So next I'm going to hand over to Alex from Cambridge and share a bit about their experiences.
Thank you, Alex. I will try and share my screen. While I do that, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Yeah, I'm Alex. I am a volunteer and project coordinator at Cambridge Sustainable Food. My background is in youth volunteering and engagement work, and kind of outside of a professional context, I also have been a kind of youth activist and organizer for quite a number of years. I've been involved in various youth-led campaigns, some of which fall very much into that tokenistic, not really a seat at the table box, and others which have been really kind of inspiring examples of giving young people a meaningful seat at a table. And those have been quite transformative to me in my journey towards campaigning for a better food system. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about a project we did at Cambridge Sustainable Food earlier this year, which was trying to be one of those really good examples of how to kind of meaningfully platform and involve young people. Trying to work out how to get this to go into presentation mode. There we go. Yeah, so earlier this year, we ran a kind of youth-led peer research project exploring the topic of young people and food in Cambridge with very kind of hyper-local focus on the north area of the city, because that is one of the most under-resourced and underrepresented areas of Cambridge and a real kind of focus area for development. And we felt that kind of as one of our first steps into trying to kind of bring young people into our food systems work, beginning in this really close community with young people who know that area and understand it and have needs within it, was the way to kind of do that on a scalable level. So this project kind of came out of a survey that was done by the Cambridge City Council in 2024, which revealed that 47% of the young people who responded to this survey felt that access to nutritious and affordable food was their biggest health concern, above climate anxiety, above mental health, above pretty much all of the things we expected might score more highly than that. And we were really interested in kind of unpacking that a bit further and working with young people to kind of understand better what that meant, what their concerns and issues were, and invite them to kind of take leadership on developing some solutions to those issues. the sort of definition of young people that we took for this project falls a little bit towards the lower end of the age bracket. We've discussed in this session, we were working with kind of school-age young people aged 13 to 18 because this is the age group that was represented in that original survey. I think one of the kind of learnings and reflections from this project has been, you know, how could we take a model like this and kind of use it to include a wider definition of young people, while kind of acknowledging the diversity that exists within that kind of wider framework. Yeah, I guess was a kind of what we did basically was follow through a structured process for young people to come together with kind of professionals, local experts, community organizations from different generations while maintaining a kind of youth-led focus, to kind of share learning, map out what we know and don't know about the issues affecting young people around food in the city, kind of support young people to develop an understanding of how change actually happens. So kind of one of our visions with this was to kind of put into context ideas young people might have, for example, about school meals and how those could be improved, and give them the sort of information from the people who make changes in those areas about, okay, if you want to change this thing, this is who you need to talk to, this is how you do it, this is how long it will take, these are the steps, to kind of equip them to be able to then go out and tell their friends and actually take some more kind of autonomous leadership on making those kinds of changes. So yeah, the sort of vision was to support these young people from kind of exploring what they already know, their thoughts, to designing and delivering a survey in their communities to gather voices from more young people, and then bringing that all back together to kind of analyze the results and develop a kind of action plan for the future. This is a kind of, I guess, a short-term project that we hope will kind of lead to a much, much longer-term process of continuing to involve young people and taking their ideas forward. Because what we really didn't want to do was do this piece of research, write a report, and then put it on a shelf and never look at it again. We wanted this to be a thing that kind of inspires action and gives people a toolkit for then taking that further. So what we did, this project ran from October 2025 to March 2026. We ran 3 facilitated workshops with a group of young people, which included a peer research period in the middle where our group went out into their schools and their communities to conduct a survey, which they had co-designed in the first 2 workshops. So we recruited a group of 16 young people from across North Cambridge. This was one of the real challenges in this project, actually. I think something we really underestimated was the time and effort that it takes to meaningfully engage young people, and to kind of getting our messaging right was a real process. I think we put out at least 3 rounds of kind of flyers and leaflets and social media posts advertising this project in different ways, because we really just got it wrong the first time. We put out a poster that said, join our peer research project. And because that's where our heads were at with what this project was about. But that language, that wording, it didn't connect with people. Nobody, at least that we got that promotion out to, looked at it and thought, yeah, I wanna do some peer research. Because actually, I think a lot of the young people maybe didn't really know what that meant, or it didn't mean much to them. So we put it out again and said, you know, do you like food? Do you want to come and talk about food and share your ideas about food? And that was a little bit more interesting. That made people ask, you know, what is this? What's going on here? How can I be involved? And then we thought a little bit about that kind of thing, which Sophie touched on, of young people very often not actually being kind of paid for their time, in a way that kind of balances, like matches the way that, you know, the staff from Cambridge Sustainable Food involved in this project were paid. So we then decided that it would be fair and make sense to offer some kind of reimbursement for the time of the young people in this project. And that was something that really was the thing that cinched it and got us a big group of young people involved, which I think one of the things that really came out of the survey results was that cost is one of the biggest things that sort of drives and restricts young people's choice around food. So that kind of reminder that, yeah, reimbursement for time in the context of the current cost of living and difficulty of finding jobs, is something that is really, really important. So yeah, we got
Alex,
a group
I'm
together.
just going to jump in very quick, just another couple of minutes left, if that's okay.
Yes, sorry, I am a
Thank you.
waffler. I will whiz through the rest of this. So yeah, we ran 2 workshops with our young people, and a couple of professionals who we'd recruited. We were mapping out kind of what they know and don't know about the food scene in Cambridge, and starting to formulate some questions that could be asked to young people about what the issues are. We divided these kind of questions that came out into different categories and co-wrote a survey together Again, in our second workshop, trained our young people up to conduct peer research, so talking about how to go about doing a survey, asking questions, what makes a good question, and sent them off on their ways to do this peer research. They gathered 84 responses to a survey, which we then brought back, analysed, and came together in a final workshop where the young people kind of went through the results and were invited to co-produce an action plan in each of the key areas from the survey, with recommendations for community organisations such as Cambridge Sustainable Food and also other stakeholders like schools, the NHS, the council. And then we put together a final report which summarises all of this. I'll stick a link to that in the chat if anybody is interested in reading it, because it goes a lot more into the survey findings and the process than I have time to do in this presentation. So yeah, what we kind of got out of this in tangible terms is, this shared vision for future of food in North Cambridge on a kind of 6 months time, 2 years time, 10 years time scale, with that question of what would food look like, and this set of actions for us and other stakeholders, which now we are trying to kind of take forward. One of those was the idea of kind of participatory budgeting, which is again similar to what Sophie said, that idea of giving young people a pot of money to do with what they think is important and want to. And yeah, we have this little network now of young people. We have relationships with schools. We found that kind of going physically into schools and talking to young people in person, kind of getting to know them a little bit, relationship building, was the most effective way of actually getting them on board with this project. And putting up posters and flyers didn't get us that far. Talking to them and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why it might be interesting to you, was the way forward. And yeah, we've got this kind of model now for co-creating youth-led tools to make more young voices heard and support young people to kind of be the main people at the table in driving change and just see the impacts of the suggestions that they have made coming to fruition. Yeah, we made connections between young people and kind of organisations in the city. We have kind of improved our own capacity for doing youth-led work now. We feel there was things that came up in those workshops, like the effect of social media on young people's relationships with food. We just hadn't thought about when mapping out what we imagined the issues around food in our city were. And yeah, we have somewhat hopefully deliverable project ideas to take this further. And we're going to continue this conversation. Our next steps now are continuing to talk to these young people, to invite them to be part of kind of the project pictures that come out of this. We're opening a community cafe space in the city really soon, and we are working with a group of young people to kind of co-design that, and again bring their kind of ideas, what they need from that physical space into reality, so that it is one, there is a kind of physical hub for youth-led change, as well as a space where young people feel welcome and able to access food. Having food as part of the sessions was something actually that made a big difference. We knew this was after school and young people might be coming hungry, and we wanted to kind of model what a kind of, on a very, very micro scale, what, a world in which food is freely and readily available, it's locally sourced, it's healthy, it's tasty, what that looks like. So our workshops were a kind of tiny little example of what that might be. Very, very briefly, I know I'm probably almost out of time, but yeah, just some of the kind of things that we struggled with and learned from this project. Some of these kind of link together, but kind of, communication was something that was really challenging, kind of getting through to young people in the first place, and then kind of keeping a dialogue with them as the project went on. We found that when our young people were in the room, they were amazing. They were so full of ideas, full of energy. Trying to get a response from over WhatsApp, over email in between, to kind of say, hey, how are you getting on with doing a survey, was very, very hard. I think I received one WhatsApp message from 16 people over the whole month they were doing their research. So I think working on how we actually kind of maybe do a bit more of that relationship building if working with a group, so that they feel confident and able to actually kind of be in dialogue the whole way through, is something that we still need to figure out. I'd be really interested if anyone has kind of more positive experiences of working with and communicating with groups of young people in this way. And then yeah,
Alex, I'm so sorry to have to cut you off very reluctantly as well. I just want to make sure we've got enough time for all our speakers and for the group discussions. And perhaps people, I know there's a few people that have already put questions for you in the chat. So maybe if others want to put questions in the chat, if you wouldn't mind replying in the chat, that would be great. Sorry that we didn't have more time. That's really interesting and really valuable. 7 minutes isn't enough for this deep deep projects and incredible work. So but yes, finally I'm going to hand over to Anya from Calderdale Food Network.
Hi everybody, I'm going to ask Bea to share a screen for me because unfortunately Teams is deciding to make my life hell today for, as usual, I won't even say for a change. So if that comes up, that's brilliant. Fabulous. Okay, so I hate doing the next slide, please, but I will do next slide, please. Firstly, I just want to say it's 7 minutes, but I just want to say I don't know how I can follow either of these last two wonderful speakers because that really has been so inspirational from both of you. Really, really amazing, and it's just made me realize how much it's fantastic to be able to work and to be able to speak to people on this topic and for us to be working together to make sure that that voice is recognised. So we in Calderdale, so first I'll introduce myself. So I head up the Calderdale Food Partnership, Calderdale Food Network, and we've been in existence since about 2017. Just towards the end of that, we became a member of Sustainable Food Places in 2018. And then applied and achieved our Bronze Award in 2021. And that was kind of a catalyst for us wanting to really review who we were we representing everybody, and to embark. We then had, thankfully and finally, support from our public health team at our council, and they recognise the value sort of in partnership in providing. We aren't housed within the council, I should say. We're completely independent cross-sector steering group. So that was the first time actually that our council reached out and said we're going to provide you with some funding, and gave us the remit to develop a food strategy, which was published in March of this year. And I think then, going into that, that made us really sort of think an evaluation is needed here. If we are going to provide a food strategy and implement it as a guideline and a framework, it absolutely has to be representative of all of our community. And so we started to look at gaps. And I'll take that in a second. So I'm going to go back to this slide here, which is why young people's voices matter. And interestingly, it was the question at the beginning. But it's really, really important to us that we thought about, if we do take action, do more action, all of us here who are working know that this is like turning a ferry rather than a kayak. It takes forever. The food system is so damaged, and it's so interwoven into everything we do, that change is going to take a very long time, and it probably won't be anywhere where it needs to be in my lifetime. So that question about who's going to benefit and therefore who should be shaping it was really, really important. And therefore, young people, it was obvious. We can't do this to you and then off we go. And again, you're left with something you need to untangle because it wasn't fit for purpose. It's really, really important that if we are developing something which is a real and honest transformation, it's got to represent and serve those people who will be involved in, participating in it every day. So we have a legacy of poor diets and food inequality, which has come to a ridiculous level, as we know, in this country and across the world, exacerbated by COVID. And I think high alerts came up there, particularly when schools had to close, about the vulnerability of young people when it comes to actually being able to access nutritious food. It was terrifying. It was a really big eye-opener to see the depth and the breadth of dependency on school meals amongst our young people and on school routines, and to really, really start to recognise and unfortunately, while it has levelled to a degree, we all know that there's increasing numbers of families and working families who are unable to provide the nutritious food required for their family on a daily basis without accessing emergency food, without losing choice. And it's a really, really bad thing. I think also within that, education, food education within schools has really, really, really been diminished, and kind of takes a token form of food science or, being a great chef and learning to make a super kind of exotic meal twice or three times during your term to bring home. The actual basics of what is food and how to source it and grow it and provide it and store it, ferment it, use it, budget for it. They've gone. And I think it's really, really important that we work to bring those back. But at the moment, we, of course, have probably our second generation of young people who really, really, that doesn't kind of happen in their lives. It doesn't occur to them. I taught for many years.
Anya, I'm just going to be really annoying again and just jump in and say we've only got like a couple of minutes left.
Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Well, we'll move on. Challenge the culture of acceptance and about readiness for the world. It was important to us, as I said, that slide's been done early, so don't worry about it. So what we did essentially, how we did it, because I think this is going to be helpful for the food partnerships. I don't think we've really done it yet, how we are doing it. So really, really important that we had representation on our Good Food Movement, which is where we see our biggest resource in Calderdale. So in developing a strategy, our resource are our people, and that's how it's going to actually have meaning. And we brought Eating Well, Living Well, a food strategy for Calderdale into action. The process really was at the same time as starting to think about that. Food Matters and Sustainable Food Places brought out the READY evaluation tool and framework, and then this year, Fair Food. And what we did from that then was to use that tool, the READY tool, to look at where we had our gaps and to reach out. Our engagement essentially was through school projects and schools, Halifax Academy being key, and they actually co-hosted the first Sustain Food Conference for young people in Leeds in 2023. We reached out to our youth council and our youth voice, and it took persistence, I have to say. So I'm not saying anything happened overnight. It didn't. The outcome of that for us is we now have two steering group members who are part of our youth council. One is a school leaver, he's just turned 18, and the other is an A-level student who's just turned 17. We also have student contributors. So Ben is a master's student in nutrition and Joe's a master's student in social and public policy, who we invite, and they come to our steering meetings as they can, and they really, really help to influence and to get us to think out of the box. And I think the main thing to sort of say about this is, having started those first bits of engagement, it leads you to so many others. And we're currently working with the students at Leeds University on the Sustainable Food Systems Masters once a year, and also now a Japanese student intern who's staying with me for 8 weeks and doing some work about replicating what we're doing over in Japan. Next slide, please. And I'm shooting through, nearly finished. The challenges are already sort of mentioned, and particularly just recently, is about identifying the platforms and the opportunities. How do you get in? How do you find people where they are? And then challenging that with school, college and university timetables and commitments. And of course, looking then at how people move out, either for school, for university. So when you are engaging, it's transient and you want to try and keep that going. And then the big thing is challenging the norm, because so many of our young people are being fooled into thinking that everything happens on the internet and everything happens on TikTok, and if you're not there, you can't do it. Next slide, please. What we think is working really, really well is having flexibility with meetings and platforms, so a mixture of online and in-person meetings, and this is for our steering group particularly. And also, you don't have to be at all of the meetings, so focused participation opportunities that actually suit when we really, really need to have our young people with us and they really want to be there. Also engaging in settings where young people are. So we're talking about schools, universities, college, youth groups and youth councils. For us, particularly, being open to new ideas and realise, don't set the agenda too tightly, make it so that people can really, really, really participate. And then co-production is key. It's not about, thanks, that was a great idea, we'll go and do it. It's about, okay, show us how we're going to do it and let's do it together. Next slide, please. And why is it great? This is the benefits for us is meetings are a bit like they are today. They're uplifting, they're amazing, they're fantastic. So lots of creative thinking, enthusiastic participation, a huge amount of new knowledge and skills for those of us who have sort of passed that, well, we haven't passed the learning stage, but certainly passed the young stage. Bright ideas and alternative approaches, which is important in understanding. We're speaking with direct lived experience, and that's really, really key, and mostly investment for the future. So for us, it's about the potential for long-term policy and systemic change, rather than doing a huge amount now and then thinking, well, it's all just fallen because we didn't include the people who can take it forward. And finally, the best thing of all is meetings are exciting, uplifting and fun. So I'd highly recommend it. And I don't know, is that my last slide? No, okay, sorry, am I done? I should just say currently we have 5 Calderdale Youth Ambassadors working with the Food Foundation. These are some quotes from these. I hope we can share slides afterwards. And 2 of those are on our steering group. And then we have also sort of been engaged on a broader level, as you'll see from the next slide. which is where Hassan, one of our steering group members, was one of the people invited to speak at the launch of the Food Cycle at Darley Street with Daniel Zeichner. And he's also on the front cover of the latest Citizens Advisory Council Food Farming and Countryside report. So, you know, our food ambassadors and our food engagement people with our youth in Calderdale have moved on and are speaking widely and more nationally. And I think that just goes to show it is being heard, it is worth investing, and they can really, really do an awful lot of fantastic things. Thank you, and sorry for overrunning. This is a beautiful quote from Emily Yanchuk, who's the Vice Chair of Bite Back. And it's really important. The voice of young people has mattered, does matter, and will matter, for we are the instruments for significant change to come. And on that note, I'll say thank you.
Beautiful ending. Thank you so much.
Next steps were sort of like, these are our ideas, but obviously if depending on what comes out in the board, we might change them. So there's sort of this idea of building a community of practice around engagement with young people, so that it could be to continue this process of exploring and sharing and bringing together like a yeah. I don't know how to, if people are up for this, just put yes in the chat would be really good. And you know, we might meet on a semi-regular basis, I don't know how often, to kind of keep working on this, so we can help produce kind of good practice materials and things like that, and produce some recommendations for the network. We definitely want to create a toolkit, and we had some really great chats in my group about how that could look, and can we get some of these great examples into like case studies, quite short case studies that we can share with people about what's working. And then how do we then get young people into this conversation, like actually you know, are we developing a youth panel, for example, to kind of bring accountability around this, and where are those young people coming from, and you know, how is that going to work, and how do they then meaningfully get involved in sustainable food places, structures, processes, and things like that. So don't want it to be tokenistic. So so we might have like a young people food forum event or something like that. That could, I think October feels a little bit early, but I think that's something that we're thinking about. And then another question for us is like, do we do similar things to this? Because obviously we've identified the 4 different groups within the Fair Food Framework. Do we have parallel communities of practice working on engaging and co-producing things with people marginalised by race, people from low-income households, and farmers and food producers? So there's a you know, or is that too much as well? Maybe we should concentrate on one group at a time, because obviously everyone's really busy. So it's sort of, you know, and if or is another group particularly important for people, they feel more strongly that we should do things with, I don't know, farmers, for example, at the moment. So all these kind of things, if anyone's got any opinions, please put them in the chat or put them on the Miro, and then we can use this to help our thinking around it.